Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Hey, welcome to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. Glad to have you with me. This is kind of an odd topic for me, but it's one that has caught my attention. If you are, for example, if you are at age 65 or above and you've signed up for Medicare, you have probably gotten a prescription drug supplemental plan to cover the cost of your prescription drugs. If you're under the age of 65 and you have a company-sponsored health insurance plan, you probably have a pharmaceutical benefit. And like at iHeartRadio, for example, we have a program that is a online pharmacy that we go to where we buy our prescription drugs. And then there are some drugs, and again, I'm using myself as an example. There are some drugs that I use. I have I've got just this chronic sinus issue, and I've seen otolaryngologists about it, and the ENT guys. In fact, Dr. Cutler in town. I think if you need a ear, nose, and throat doctor, I think Dr. Cutler in that practice is a number one. But in the process of Dr. Cutler, over the years, having dug around in my nose and my sinus cavities and stuff, prescribed a particular drug. It's a nasal spray. And what it does is it really opens up my nasal cavities so that I can breathe easier, so that my voice isn't quite as, everybody hates their own voice, and I think my voice is bizarre. But anyway, people say it's a good radio voice, but that's neither here nor there. But it also changes the tone of my voice because it opens up so well. When he first prescribed this nasal spray, I had it either through King Soopers or Walgreens, I forget where it was. And holy cow, the first time I went in to get a bottle, the little spray bottle, $300 for this particular nasal spray for a 30-day supply. So I started digging around trying to figure out, because I'm like, first of all, the insurance company barely paid part of the cost. So regardless of whatever they paid, 40%, 50%, 60%, it's still an expensive nasal spray. So I start digging around, and I find, you have these different, they're not really pharmaceutical benefit companies, but they're almost discount clubs that you join. And I found one called Good RX. And look, it worked out well for me. It may not work out well for you, but I think I pay $5 a month or something for it. And what it did is it brought down the price. Now just think about this. I join a discount club, and the cost of that nasal spray goes from $300 down to about $200, almost a third drop in price. So that was beneficial to me. I mean, $5 a month for a 1/3 discount, that's pretty good. But doesn't it make you wonder why? Like, okay, I'm paying $5 a month to join this club. Well, obviously it's because they have a larger buying capacity, so they can buy in larger quantities, or whatever arrangements they have with different pharmaceutical companies allows them to purchase that drug at a cheaper price and then provide it at a retail price that's much lower than what I was just getting at the full retail price. Then I've noticed that over the course of, and I don't use this nasal spray every single month. I just buy it and use it when my nasal cavities are really bugging me. I noticed that I refilled it about a week ago, and the retail price had dropped down. This is, again, with the discount program, the discount club or whatever it is, and whatever you call Good RX. It had dropped even further to $125. Now, I've gone from $300 to $125 over the course of the past couple of years. And I'm really perplexed, and I can't find the answer Obviously, a good RX is just like, well, we don't know, because you can't really find somebody when you call the 800 number. Hey, I want to know why the price of this has gone down. Well, the CSR, the customer service rep, is not really equipped to provide answers to those kinds of questions, and nor are they going to dig around to find out from whoever their supplier or vendors are or whatever to explain to me, one simple customer, why the price of one particular product dropped as much as it did. But it got me digging around, because I wanted you hear about, well, President Trump wants us to be able to re-import drugs from Canada. And I thought I'm thinking to myself, so pharmaceutical company X, whether they have manufacturing companies or the product is manufactured here in Canada, Israel, Europe, wherever these products are manufactured, what makes the fact that we're going to re-import a drug? Let's just say that the nasal spray that I use is imported from Canada. And as a matter of fact, I've got the box in front of me, manufactured by Apotex Inc., Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And it's manufactured for Apotex Corporation in Weston, Florida. So, Weston, Florida. So this nasal spray, Olopatadine, maybe I'm giving out way too much. Maybe I'm violating some HIPAA rule here. Call somebody that cares. So I use this spray called Olopatadine, a nasal solution. Let's see. What else can I tell you about it? It's interesting. It's got some preservatives in it. It's got a lot of inactive stuff in it. Each spray delivers 665 micrograms or whatever of Olopatadine hydrochloride in a 100 milligram solution, equivalent to 600 blah, blah, blah. You don't care about all of that, and I don't care about all of that. What I care about is here is this spray that the cost that it's actually manufactured in Canada. It's manufactured there. It's imported into the United States, and for reasons that I can't explain, the price has continued to drop. But what got me curious is the idea of reimportation. Actually manufacturing a drug here that is then distributed in Canada, and now we want to re-import that drug back into the United States, and somehow that's going to save us money. So I started doing some research, and I found, when did this occur? This is from 2004. Dr. Milton Friedman and the Reimportation Debate. This was done by, I should be more prepared than this, and I apologize, I'm not more prepared. I've read through this thing, and I never thought to think about who actually sponsored this. But anyway, whoever sponsored it sponsored a debate between Dr. Friedman about the reimportation of drugs. And in the course of this debate, Dr. Friedman is asked this question. I know you signed a statement with 140 other economists in opposition of reimportation because of the issue of price controls. Maybe, Dr. Friedman, you could explain that, why you feel this is a different case and this is not a case of free trade. And Dr. Friedman says this, so bear with me. Oh, it's not a case of price controls. That isn't the issue either. The issue is patents. The issue is a government-granted monopoly and whether how extensively the rights that are granted for that purpose extend. The real issue is not really reimportation. The real issue, in my opinion, is the Food and Drug Administration. The FDA in the United States has followed policy, which means that it costs roughly $800 million to bring a single new drug entity to the market. And the question, Dr. Friedman says, is where is that $800 million going to come from? The answer that we have given, whether the right answer or the wrong answer, the answer we have been given is that it's going to come by giving the producer of that drug a patent, a monopoly privilege to sell that drug to exclude others from the sale of that drug. And Dr. Friedman continues, and the question is, are you going to enforce that exclusion? The only way in which that $800 million can be raised is by charging very high prices to some people. Now, the question is given that you're charging those high prices to some people. Is it okay to charge low prices to some people? This is a standard case of a monopoly which engages in price discrimination as a way of maximizing its income. It charges high prices where the elasticity of demand is low. It charges low prices where the elasticity of demand is relatively high to the citizens of other countries. Consider the following case, he says. Suppose somebody in Canada simply counterfeits a patented drug. Does free trade require that the U.S. accept importation of that drug? I think the answer's no if you're going to enforce the patent. You have to keep out such counterfeits. Well, fundamentally, and from an economic point of view, essentially when drugs that are purchased in the United States under a contract that they will be sold in Canada or instead shipped to the United States, well, that's exactly the same thing. That's violating the patent law. And the question is, should the U.S. government enforce one aspect of the patent but not another? That's the real issue. There's no denying the fact that prices are cheaper in Canada. But the purpose of the law, the purpose of the patent, was to enable the patent owner to make enough money to pay for the cost of producing the drug. And that's not going to be possible unless you have price discrimination. And price discrimination adds to human welfare. It permits a large number of people around the world to have the drug that it couldn't otherwise do so. Dr. Friedman's right. I'm paying a higher price, or at least initially I was paying a higher price, and that was allowing the manufacturer of this drug, Olopatadine, to perhaps provide it at a lower cost to other consumers. Now, I'd rather be on the other end of the scale, getting the drug at a lower price, but I don't know how long this drug's been in production. But perhaps the other thing that's occurring is the price of the drug has dropped because as the manufacturer of the drug has recouped the initial cost of inventing, developing, manufacturing, distributing the drug, as it has done so, and done so with price discrimination, selling it higher to me, lower to somebody else, it has eventually recouped its cost, and now the cost of the drug is coming down. I actually think that's what's happening, and I think that's what happened in this case. But later in the debate, and it's amazing to me because it shows how long it takes to really do significant policy changes in this country. This is a debate, as I said, that took place on February 2nd, 2004, 15 years ago. 15 years ago, they're talking about drug reimportation, just as we are today, but they also talked about something else. Dr. Friedman has asked this. Dr. Friedman, do you think that Congressman Gutnick just said the best way to get drug prices down is to have the government negotiate on people's behalf? Do you think that's the best way to get drug prices down? Where have we heard that before? President Trump, members of Congress have been talking about we should have the government negotiate drug prices. Now, initially, I have a repulsion to that idea. The idea that the government is going to sit down with the private sector and they're going to negotiate the price of a drug. Now, remember, the pharmaceutical companies, and everybody loves to hate the pharmaceutical companies, just like we love to hate lawyers, love to hate insurance companies, we love to hate all these institutions that, quite frankly, we rely upon and we need. You hate lawyers until you need a lawyer. You hate your insurance company until they actually pay out the claim and help you rebuild your home that burned down. We hate the drug companies until we find out that, oh, there is a miracle drug that's going to solve my problem, and then you're more than willing, again, depending upon price elasticity and your willingness to pay a price, oh, there's a drug over there that will help me solve whatever medical issue I have? Yeah, I want that drug. It costs what? Holy cow. Let me figure out a way to get it, just like I did. The sticker shock initially, $300 for a 30-day supply? Well, okay, maybe I'm not going to use it as much. But then I start doing my research. I find that I can get it at a discount through this Gold RX. And then the price of the drug over the past, I would say 5 years, has continued to drop anyway. Why do you think it's dropped? Well, I think because the drug manufacturer has recouped the initial cost, the initial investment, but through price discrimination. And over time, and particularly, now I don't know whether there's still a patent on this particular nasal spray or not, but as generics become available, then that brings the price of the drugs down. But let's go back to the second question that Dr. Friedman was asked. Do you think that government negotiating on people's behalf to get drug prices down, do you think that's the best way to get drug prices down? And here's what Dr. Friedman said. No. Of course he's going to say no. No, I don't think that would get drug prices down. But I want to go back to the other point. It would be desirable for wealthy nations to eliminate price controls. But so far as the issue we're talking about today, that would not affect that issue one bit. You would still have the situation that a pharmaceutical company produces a drug. That drug involved a lot of cost in developing it. It has to get that money back. It's going to charge a high price at home. It will, in its own interest, want to sell that same drug abroad as well. Should it be prohibited from charging a lower price abroad than at home? I don't think anybody would say that it should. But then in that case, the same issue would arise. The company makes a contract with a Canadian importer. That contract is, quote, we will sell you this drug at this lower price, provided you agree not to re-import it into the United States. Should that contract be enforced? That's a fundamental issue, and the existence of price control or no price control really doesn't affect it. I think the bottom line is this. I think this is a good economic lesson in understanding that, yes, we can hate the pharmaceutical companies, but what really drives the cost of the invention, the R&D, and eventually the approval and production of a particular drug? What's the one thing that every drug company has to do? They have to go through the FDA. The FDA, in my opinion, in fact, I used to know the chairman of the FDA at one time when I was in the Bush administration. Good guy. And he really was trying to streamline the drug approval process. But when you think about government bureaucrats who are risk averse, and I'm not saying that they should not be risk averse, but if you are so risk averse, because if you approve a drug and make the drug, you make the pharmaceutical company go through all of these trials, all of the experimentation, all of the approval process, in all of those different things you have to go through to get a drug approved, it is a natural tendency of the FDA, or for that matter, any bureaucracy, to be risk averse. So you try to do everything you can. You try to find perfection in perfection. You try to make it as perfect as possible. It's like I've always argued that if you really want to shut down Washington, D.C., drop a dirty bomb. You don't have to contaminate, but just a small area, say on the National Mall. And you know why? Because the bureaucrats at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission or at the Environmental Protection Agency, all of those bureaucrats can't reach a decision on how clean is clean. How much of the radioactivity do we have to clean up before we can say it's now safe to go back on the National Mall? That debate would rage in the bureaucracy. It would rage in Congress. It would rage in the media because nobody could reach an agreement on how clean is clean. We want perfection when we don't really need perfection. We get bombarded by radiation every single day, all the time. So you drop a dirty bomb. First of all, that just the concept of, there's radioactivity somewhere. People are naturally scared of that. And so they're naturally going to be scared of a dirty bomb, and the risk-averse bureaucracy is not going to be satisfied because, oh my gosh, what are we going to do if we determine that X is, whatever that formula is, X is clean enough that the public can then go back there? And then 10 years later, we see a slight spike in cancers. Is there a causal link? Is there any correlation? Or is it just because those particular people happen to get cancer more than somebody else? Now go back to the FDA. The FDA is in the same position, risk averse. Oh, we can't approve the sale and distribution of this drug until we have gone to the most absurd lengths to make certain that there are no problems. And if you think that that's the end-all and be-all, I challenge you to do this. Sit down sometime. Take any medication that your doctor has prescribed. Take out, I forget what they call it, the crimp sheet. This box still has a crimp sheet in it, I think. Let me pull it out and look at it. You can hear I'm opening it up. It's such small type I probably can't read it. But I challenge you to do this. So here's the crimp sheet. I don't know how many pages this would print out to be if it was actually, like 8.5 by 11 inch paper. But I've got it open, and of course there's the contraindications, warnings, and precautions, and then you get to section 10. Here's sections 10 through 17. Overdose, description, clinical pharmacology, non-clinical toxicology, clinical studies, how supplied, storage, and handling, patient counseling and information. And it actually goes through, for example, pediatric patients 6 to 11 years of age, has tables of adverse reactions, patients 2 to 5 years of age, long-term 12-month safety trials, post-marketing experience, drug interactions, use in specific populations such as pregnancy. It just goes on and on and on. All of this is required by the FDA, the lawyers, so that you are informed about every potential adverse reaction. Everything. Now you think about the cost. Let's go back. Scientists in a laboratory. They're inventing this one simple nasal spray that I use. They finally come up with something that they think, this is going to help a guy like Michael Brown and his nasal issues. They develop the product. They then start taking out. There's a process with the FDA throughout everything that the pharmaceutical company does from the moment they start trying to invent the drug. They go through that entire process. They go through all the clinical trials, all the clinical studies. They go through all of that while simply trying to develop a simple nasal spray. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars developing the drug. Then once it gets approved, then the lawyers get involved. And now the lawyers have to print out this, approve the crimp sheet about what you have to say about the drug. No wonder this little bottle cost $300 a month when I first bought it. They had to recoup all of those costs because guess what? They're operating on a profit motive. They are not a non-profit corporation. What if they were a non-profit corporation? They'd probably be out of business. A non-profit corporation, simply meaning that they don't operate on a profit, would still have all of these expenses trying to get the product to market. So don't feed me this crap about, this is why we need to take away pharmaceutical companies and turn them all into nonprofits or into government entities. Do you really want the government? Think about what the FDA does. Do you really want the government developing and coming up with new drugs? Go out to the TSA. Go through that. Go to the DMV. Go to the post office. Go to almost any government organization, even law enforcement. Go to your favorite cop and ask your favorite cop about the bureaucracy that he or she has to deal with in his or her department. It's the nature of government. There's my lecture for the day. Only because I had to buy this nasal spray. And I'm ticked off about the price. I'm fascinated by the price drop. But I'm also fascinated by the fact that we have this desire in this country that we want the government to do everything. I don't want the government involved in health care, even though pretty soon I'm going to be because of my age. Don't laugh about that. Stop and think. I think it's like my lecture on the radio about people don't understand what it takes to run a business. I think yesterday or day before in describing, I talked about convenience stores, and I talked about the cost of operating a convenience store. Sometime, if you know somebody or you know somebody that knows somebody, or for that matter, if you know the company you work for, maybe you're a low-level manager, you should go talk to some, senior VP, or look at your company's financials. Look at the amount of money that they have to spend to make a profit. And before they can make a profit, they have to pay your salary, your benefits, the cost of goods that they sell, or the cost of the services that they provide. They have to do all of those things. I just don't think many Americans stop and think about what it takes to run a business, whether that's a pharmaceutical business, that's a law firm, it's a convenience store, it's a plumbing business. It doesn't make any difference. There's costs involved in all of that. Dr. Friedman, so glad you were alive. Wish you were still around to help us understand this whole debate about our healthcare system, because I think we are on the road to socialized medicine, and I'm not sure that we're going to be able to stop it, because everybody, and I get it, everybody wants to bitch and moan about the cost of medicine. They want to bitch and moan about the cost of health insurance premiums and everything else. That's a whole different subject for a different day. But this one instance of this one drug and Dr. Friedman's response to it, I think, is a great example of how we just failed to understand what it cost to produce my nasal spray. Thanks for listening to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. I hope you learned something. I hope it caused you to just stop and think about something. And I do encourage you, go to your medicine cabinet, find that medication, or look it up online. Because if you, I don't care, it's your blood pressure medicine, it's the daily aspirin you take, whatever it is, I want you to look at the crimp sheet or go online, look up the medication, and look up the contraindications, and look up the potential adverse effects, because everything can potentially kill you. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you tomorrow.